The Day the Moon Fell. Part 1. The Stranger in the Market. In the small, quiet town of Willow Creek, life moved slowly. People woke up early, worked hard, and ended their days by gathering at the local market or by sitting on their porches, talking about nothing much. It was a place where everyone knew everyone else. Nothing unusual ever happened here, until one strange morning. That day, the market was buzzing as usual. Farmers sold fresh vegetables, children chased each other, and shopkeepers greeted their regular customers. Then, someone new walked into the market. He wasn't from the town. His clothes were dusty, and his shoes were worn out. He carried a bag that looked heavy, but no one could see what was inside. His face was serious, but his eyes darted around like he was looking for something or someone. People stopped and stared. It wasn't often that strangers came to Willow Creek. Mrs. Betty, who ran the bakery, whispered to Mr. Clark, the butcher, "Who do you think he is? A traveler, maybe?" Mr. Clark just shrugged. "Don't know, but he sure looks odd." The stranger walked straight to the center of the market and stood on an old wooden crate. He cleared his throat loudly. The sound made everyone turn to look at him. "I have something important to tell you," he said, his voice strong but shaky. "The moon has fallen from the sky." For a moment, there was silence. Then, laughter broke out. "The moon? Fallen? What nonsense," said old Mr. Harris, who was leaning on his cane. The stranger didn't seem bothered by their laughter. He waited until it died down. Then he added, "It's true. The moon is no longer in the sky. It landed in my backyard last night." "Which backyard?" someone shouted. "Mine," the stranger replied. "I live in the small house by the old oak tree, just outside of town." Mrs. Betty crossed her arms. "That's crazy talk. The moon can't fall to earth. If it did, we'd all be gone by now." "I'm not lying," the stranger insisted. "I saw it with my own eyes. It's huge, glowing, and, well, it's there. You can come see it if you don't believe me." By now, the crowd was restless. Some people muttered that he was mad. Others just shook their heads and walked away. But a few, especially the younger ones, were curious. "What if he's telling the truth?" whispered Katie, a teenager with a curious mind. "Come on, Katie," said her friend Mike. "It's probably just a big rock or something. The moon can't just fall." Still, Katie wasn't so sure. She had always loved looking at the moon through her old telescope. She thought about how strange it would be if it really had fallen. The stranger climbed down from the crate. "I won't force anyone to come," he said, "but I'll be waiting. If you want to see it, come by my house tonight after sunset." He picked up his bag and walked out of the market. The crowd slowly went back to their business, but the stranger's words stayed in their minds. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a small group of curious townsfolk made their way to the old oak tree outside of town. Katie was among them, dragging Mike along despite his protests. Mrs. Betty came, too, though she claimed she just wanted to make sure the stranger wasn't planning anything dangerous. As they neared the stranger's house, they noticed something strange. A faint, silvery light was shining from behind the house. It wasn't the light of a lantern or a fire. It was softer, cooler, almost magical. The group hesitated, standing in the shadows. "Do you see that?" whispered Katie. Before anyone could answer, the stranger appeared in the doorway. He was smiling now, a wide grin that made him look completely different from the serious man in the market. "Welcome," he said, stepping aside to let them in. "Come and see the truth for yourselves." The group exchanged nervous glances. Slowly, one by one, they followed him inside. What they saw next would change everything they thought they knew about the world. Part 2. The Glowing Mystery. The group of townsfolk stepped into the stranger's small house. It was old and smelled like wood and earth. The furniture was simple: a table, 2 chairs, and a shelf with a few dusty books. There were no pictures or decorations on the walls. It was as if the house was not meant to be lived in, but only to hide something unusual. "Follow me," the stranger said. He picked up a lantern and led them through the house. The small group hesitated for a moment, but their curiosity pushed them forward. Katie was the first to follow, with Mike close behind her. Mrs. Betty and a few others trailed cautiously. The stranger led them out the back door into a small yard surrounded by tall trees, and there it was. A giant, glowing object sat in the middle of the yard. It was round and smooth, and it shimmered with a silvery light. It was so bright that it lit up the whole yard like it was daytime. The group froze, their mouths open in shock. It looks like the moon," Katie whispered. "But that's impossible," Mrs. Betty exclaimed, her voice shaky. "The moon can't just fall to earth. It's huge. This must be some kind of trick." The stranger shook his head. "It's no trick," he said. "I told you the truth. The moon fell last night. It came down quietly, like a feather floating to the ground. I heard a soft sound, like wind rustling through leaves. When I came outside, it was here." Mike took a step closer to the glowing object. "It's smaller than the real moon, though, isn't it? The moon is supposed to be huge, way bigger than this." "That's true," the stranger admitted. "I don't understand it myself. Maybe it shrank as it fell, or maybe this is just a part of it. I don't know. But it's real. You can touch it if you want." The group exchanged uneasy glances. Katie, braver than the others, stepped forward and reached out her hand. As her fingers brushed the surface, she gasped. "It's warm," she said. "Not hot, just warm. And it feels soft, like silk." Mike, encouraged by Katie's reaction, touched it too. "She's right," he said. "It's not hard like a rock. It's soft and smooth." Mrs. Betty, still skeptical, refused to go near it. "This could be dangerous," she warned. "What if it's some kind of poison or a trap? We don't even know who this man really is." The stranger raised his hands. I promise, I mean no harm, he said. I didn't ask for this to happen. It just did. And now I don't know what to do. Have you told anyone else? Asked Mr. Clark, who had come along to keep an eye on the situation. The stranger shook his head. No one would believe me. I barely believe it myself. Katie looked at the glowing object again. It was so beautiful, almost magical, but something about it felt strange. It didn't seem natural. What if it's not really the moon? She asked aloud. What if it's something else? Something pretending to be the moon? The group fell silent. The idea was unsettling. Pretending? Mike asked. Why would anything pretend to be the moon? I don't know, Katie admitted. But doesn't it feel weird? The moon is supposed to stay in the sky. It doesn't just fall. And if it did, wouldn't we all have seen it? Wouldn't the whole world have noticed? She's right, Mrs. Betty said. The moon doesn't just disappear without anyone noticing. This must be something else. The stranger looked troubled. I've thought about that too, he said. But if it's not the moon, then what is it? And why is it here? Before anyone could answer, there was a sudden noise from the trees, a loud rustling, as if something or someone was moving through the woods. The group turned toward the sound, their hearts racing. Who's there? Mr. Clark called out, his voice firm. For a moment, there was silence. Then, out of the shadows, a figure appeared. It was a tall man wearing a dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat. His face was hidden in the shadow of the hat, but his presence was intimidating. I see you found it, the man said, his voice calm but cold. Found what? The stranger asked, stepping forward. The man pointed to the glowing object. That? It doesn't belong to you. Who are you? Mrs. Betty demanded. And what do you mean it doesn't belong to him? What is it? The man ignored her questions and stepped closer to the object. This is not the moon, he said. It's something far more dangerous, and you should not be standing so close to it. Dangerous, Katie repeated, her voice trembling. What do you mean? The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a strange-looking device. It was small and metallic, with glowing blue lights and buttons. He pressed one of the buttons, and the glowing object began to hum softly. What are you doing? The stranger demanded. Protecting you, the man replied. You don't understand what you've brought into your town. This thing, it's not from here. It's not even from this world. The group stared at him, their fear growing. What do you mean, not from this world? Mike asked. The man looked at him for a long moment before answering. It's not your moon, he said. It's something far worse. And if we don't act quickly, it could destroy everything. Part 3. The Truth Revealed. The group stood frozen, their eyes shifting between the glowing object and the mysterious man with the strange device. The soft humming from the object grew louder, filling the night air. For a moment, no one spoke. Finally, Katie broke the silence. What do you mean it's not from this world? What is it? The man sighed, lowering the device but keeping it close to his chest. It's hard to explain, he said. But you deserve to know the truth. This thing came from far away. It's not the moon. It only looks like the moon to confuse people, to make them think it's harmless. But it's not harmless. It's a trap. A trap for what? The stranger asked, his voice shaking. The man's face was still hidden under his wide-brimmed hat, but his tone was serious. For us, he said. For humans, the group gasped. Now, wait just a minute, Mr. Clark said, stepping forward. Are you saying this glowing ball came from aliens? The man nodded. Something like that. Katie's eyes widened. Aliens? Like creatures from another planet? Yes, the man replied. But they're not like the aliens you've seen in movies. They don't want to visit or make friends. They want to take over. Mrs. Betty shook her head. This is ridiculous. First, we're told the moon has fallen, and now we're talking about aliens? What kind of story is this? It's not a story, the man said firmly. This is real. I've been tracking these things for years. They're not alive, not in the way we think. They're machines built to study and control. They land quietly, make themselves look like something familiar, and then they start to change the place where they land. Change how? Katie asked, her voice trembling. The man stepped closer to the glowing object. They release invisible particles into the air, he explained. Those particles spread, and slowly they start to affect everything. Plants, animals, even people. The changes are small at first. You might feel tired or forget things. But over time, it gets worse. The land becomes unlivable. And by the time anyone realizes what's happening, it's too late. The group stared at him in stunned silence. The idea was too big, too strange to believe. How do you know all this? Mike finally asked. The man hesitated. Because I've seen it before, he said quietly. What do you mean before? The stranger asked. The man turned to face the group fully, his hat casting a long shadow on the ground. This isn't the first one, he said. It's the third. The first landed in a remote village in another country. The second landed in a forest far from here. Both times, I tried to stop them, but I was too late. The group exchanged nervous glances. What happened to those places? Katie asked. The man's voice was heavy. They're gone, he said. The land is empty now. Nothing grows there. No one lives there. They've been erased. Mrs. Betty's face turned pale. Erased? You mean everything? The man interrupted. Everything was wiped out. That's why I came here. I've been tracking this one since it entered the atmosphere. I was hoping to stop it before it could do any damage. But it hasn't done anything yet, Mike said. Right? It's just sitting here, glowing. For now, the man agreed. But it won't stay that way. These things are patient. They wait until they've spread their particles far enough. Then they activate. Activate? Katie asked. What happens then? The man's expression darkened. Then it's too late, he said. The group fell silent again, the weight of his words sinking in. So what do we do? The stranger asked. How do we stop it? The man held up his device. This is a disruptor, he explained. It can neutralize the object and stop it from spreading its particles. But it's not easy. The process takes time, and it's dangerous. If anything goes wrong, the object could become unstable. Unstable how? Mrs. Betty asked, her voice trembling. It could explode, the man said simply. And if it does, it will destroy everything within miles. The group gasped again. You mean it could wipe out the whole town? Katie asked. The man nodded. Yes. That's why I need your help. I can't do this alone. What kind of help? The stranger asked cautiously. I need to set up a containment field around the object, the man explained. It will keep the particles from spreading while I use the disruptor. But the field needs to be powered manually. Someone will have to stand at each corner of the field and keep the generators running. That sounds risky, Mr. Clark said. It is, the man admitted. But it's the only way. The group looked at each other. No one wanted to volunteer, but they all knew the danger was real. Finally, Katie stepped forward. I'll help, she said. Katie, no. Mike protested. We have to do something, Katie said firmly. If we don't, the whole town could be destroyed. I can't just stand here and do nothing. The stranger stepped forward. 2. I'll help, he said. One by one, the others reluctantly agreed. Even Mrs. Betty, though still skeptical, couldn't walk away. The man nodded, a look of gratitude in his eyes. Thank you, he said. With your help, we can stop this before it's too late. He began to explain what they needed to do, and the group listened carefully. The glowing object continued to hum softly, as if it knew what was coming. As the night deepened, the group prepared for what would be the most dangerous and important task of their lives. Part 4. The struggle to stop the disaster. The night was darker now. The moon was still hidden behind the clouds, leaving the world below in a strange kind of twilight. The group stood near the glowing object, preparing for the dangerous task ahead. The mysterious man had shown them where to place the generators to create the containment field. He had also explained how to use the disruptor, the device that could neutralize the glowing object. Katie looked around at the group, her heart beating fast. Everyone seemed nervous, but no one was backing down. They all knew what was at stake. The man had warned them that if anything went wrong, the glowing object could explode, taking the whole town with it. The thought made her feel cold, even though the air was warm. We'll need to move quickly, the man said, adjusting his hat. His voice was steady, but there was a hint of worry in his eyes. Once the containment field is in place, we'll have to activate the disruptor immediately. If we wait too long, the object could start spreading its particles faster. The longer we wait, the more dangerous it becomes. The group nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. They had to act fast. There was no time to waste. "Let's do this," Katie said, taking a deep breath. She tried to calm her nerves, but her hands were shaking. She glanced at Mike, who smiled at her, trying to comfort her, though he was nervous too. Mr. Clark, the town's mayor, looked at the group and gave a firm nod. "We've all agreed to help. Now we need to stick together and do this right. Let's stay focused." The man led them to the four corners of the object. At each corner, they set up a generator, a large metal box with buttons and switches. The man explained that these generators would send out a pulse, creating an invisible barrier around the glowing object. "Once the generators are turned on," he said, "the field will keep the particles from spreading. It will also stop the object from activating too soon. But we need to keep the generators running until the disruptor can neutralize it." Katie took a deep breath and walked to her assigned corner. She stood next to the generator, staring at the glowing object in the center of the field. It looked so peaceful, almost like a full moon on a clear night. But Katie knew better now. It wasn't the moon. It wasn't peaceful. It was dangerous. Mike walked to the corner next to her, and Mr. Clark took his place at the other side. The stranger, who had joined them earlier, took his position too. The man with the hat stayed close to the disruptor, checking it one last time. "Is everyone ready?" the man asked, looking around at the group. "Ready," Katie said, her voice steady despite the fear she felt inside. Everyone else nodded, their faces serious. The man raised his hand. "On my count, we'll turn on the generators at the same time. We need to be quick and careful. The slightest mistake could trigger the explosion." Katie's heart raced. This was it. They were about to do something no one had ever imagined. 3, 2, 1. "Now," the man shouted. At that moment, Katie pressed the button on the generator. A soft buzz filled the air, and the machine began to hum. Slowly, the field started to glow, creating an invisible barrier around the object. The other generators activated at the same time, and the entire area was surrounded by the energy field. Katie looked at the object in the center of the field. It was still glowing softly, but there was no sign of it activating or changing. "Good. We're in the clear for now," the man said, breathing a sigh of relief. "Now we need to get the disruptor in place." He carefully moved toward the object, holding the disruptor in his hands. The device looked strange, like a gun, but with glowing lights along its sides. He pointed it at the object and adjusted the settings. "Here we go," the man said. He pressed a button on the disruptor. A loud click echoed through the air. For a second, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the glowing object began to flicker, its light dimming. Katie watched with wide eyes. Was it working? Had they really stopped it? The man stepped back, watching the object closely. It's starting to power down. The disruptor is doing its job. We just need to keep it steady." But just as he spoke, the ground beneath them began to shake. "What's happening?" Mike yelled, looking around in panic. The humming from the object grew louder again, and the sky above them darkened. The light from the object flickered wildly, flashing in every direction. "Oh no," the man said, his face pale. "It's reacting to the disruptor. We need to turn off the generators before it gets worse." Katie's hands trembled as she quickly turned to the generator. But before she could press the button, there was a loud bang, and the ground beneath them cracked open. The object in the center of the field started to rise, glowing brighter than ever. It was no longer just an object. It was alive. "No! Get back!" the man shouted. The group scrambled to move, but the ground continued to shake violently. The object hovered above them, its light flashing like a strobe. It seemed to be pulling in all the energy from the generators. "We've got to stop it now," the man yelled, but his voice was barely heard over the deafening noise. Katie looked at him, fear rising in her chest. They had done everything right, so why was this happening? Was it too late to save the town? Suddenly, the stranger, who had been standing quietly at his corner, took a step forward. "I know what to do," he said. Katie turned to him. "What do you mean?" "I can stop it," the stranger said. "I've seen this before. I know how to make it work." The man with the disruptor looked at him in surprise. "You do?" The stranger nodded. "Yes. I can control it. Just give me a moment." Without waiting for anyone to stop him, the stranger stepped closer to the object. He held out his hands, and the light from the object seemed to respond. The ground stopped shaking, and the light dimmed once again. Katie gasped. Could this stranger really have the power to stop the disaster? She watched, her heart in her throat, as the stranger stepped even closer to the glowing object. For the first time that night, the group saw hope. Would this be the end of the chaos? Could they finally stop the strange object before it was too late? Part 5. The Secret Revealed. The air around them felt heavy as the stranger moved closer to the glowing object. Katie and the others stood frozen, watching with wide eyes. The object's light flickered, but it didn't explode or grow any larger. It seemed to calm down, almost as if it was listening to the stranger. Katie's heart pounded in her chest. Could the stranger really stop it? Could he truly control this strange thing that had fallen from the sky? She didn't know, but she was starting to believe that maybe he could. The stranger stood in front of the glowing object, his hands held out in front of him. The light from the object seemed to respond, glowing brighter for a moment before dimming again. The ground beneath them had stopped shaking, and the buzzing sound that filled the air was no longer as loud. It was like everything was slowing down, as if the object was waiting for the stranger's next move. "Is it over?" Mike asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. He took a step forward, not sure if it was safe to get too close. "I think so," the stranger replied, his voice calm. He didn't seem scared at all. In fact, he seemed completely in control. But we're not done yet. Katie stepped closer to him, her curiosity getting the better of her. What do you mean? She asked, her voice shaking a little. What is that thing? Where did it come from? The stranger glanced at her, then back at the glowing object. I'll tell you everything. But first, we need to make sure this thing is truly neutralized. He motioned for the group to step back. They moved away from the object, though none of them took their eyes off it. They were all nervous, still unsure of what was happening. The stranger took a deep breath and closed his eyes for a moment. Then, he opened them and began to speak. This is not from your world, he said, his voice steady. This object, this thing, came from somewhere far away, somewhere beyond your sky. Katie frowned, confused. Beyond our sky? What do you mean? The stranger nodded. It's not something that fell by accident. It was sent here. And it's not just an object. It's alive in a way. It has a purpose. Katie and the others exchanged looks, still unsure whether to believe him. But the stranger's words seemed to make sense. After all, how could something so powerful and strange just fall from the sky without any reason? The truth is, the stranger continued, this object is a kind of key. It was sent to this town for a reason. It's supposed to open something hidden deep beneath the earth. Katie's eyes widened. Open something? What do you mean? The stranger didn't answer right away. He turned his attention back to the glowing object. Slowly, the light from the object began to dim further. Katie could hear the soft hum again, but it was quieter now. Like I said, it's a key, the stranger explained. And it's meant to unlock something that's been buried for a long time. But it wasn't meant to be here, not like this. It was supposed to land somewhere else. What is it unlocking? Mike asked, his voice full of curiosity. The stranger looked around at them. I can't say exactly. Not yet. But I can tell you this. Whatever is down there, beneath the town, is something powerful. And it could change everything. Katie's mind raced. She had always known there was something strange about this town, but she never imagined it was hiding something like this beneath the surface. The object, the strange man, and the glowing light. It was all connected. But why now? Katie asked. Why did it land here in our town? The stranger paused, thinking for a moment. I don't know. I'm not the one who sent it. But I think it chose this place for a reason. Maybe it sensed something here, something hidden, something important. Katie couldn't help but feel a chill run through her. If the stranger was right, then their small town was at the center of something much bigger than they could ever imagine. Is it dangerous? Mike asked, his voice trembling. The stranger nodded slowly. Yes. The object itself is not dangerous, not unless it's activated in the wrong way. But what it's unlocking, that could be dangerous. That's why I've been trying to stop it from causing any more damage. Katie could see the fear in the stranger's eyes now, something she hadn't noticed before. He wasn't just protecting the town from the object. He was trying to protect it from what was hidden underneath. "We have to make sure the object is neutralized for good," the stranger said, his voice serious. "And we have to find a way to keep whatever is down there from being awakened." Katie felt her stomach tighten. She knew they were running out of time. The longer they waited, the more dangerous it could become. But she also knew they couldn't just destroy the object without understanding what it was doing. "We'll help you," Mr. Clark said, stepping forward. "We won't let anything bad happen to our town." The stranger looked at the mayor and nodded. "I know, and I'm grateful for that. But there's more we need to do. This isn't over yet." Katie took a deep breath. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew they had to keep moving forward. They had to find a way to stop whatever was coming, before it was too late. "Let's do it," she said, her voice stronger now. "We can figure this out." Together, the stranger smiled at her, his eyes full of respect. "That's the spirit. Now, let's finish this." He turned back to the glowing object, which had now completely dimmed. The light was nearly gone, but they all knew it wasn't truly over. They still had one more challenge to face: the unknown power that lay beneath their feet. Part 6. The Final Secret. The group stood in front of the glowing object, now almost completely dimmed. The air felt thick with tension. Katie, Mike, Mr. Clark, and the rest of the townsfolk knew that the next few minutes could change everything. The stranger had said they had to stop whatever was hidden beneath the town. But how? The stranger, who had been leading them this far, looked serious. His eyes were focused on the object, as if trying to figure out his next move. Katie could feel her heart beating faster. The mystery was far from over. She could tell that what they had learned so far was only the beginning. "We need to be quick," the stranger said, breaking the silence. "The object is calming down, but it can still activate whatever is down there. If we don't do something now, it will wake up, and when it does, there's no telling what might happen." Katie swallowed hard. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice shaky. "How do we stop it?" The stranger turned to her, his face serious but calm. "We have to get close to the object. Only then can we stop it from activating the hidden power. It's the only way." Katie looked at the object, still glowing faintly in front of them. It looked harmless now, but she had no doubt that it could cause serious trouble if they didn't act fast. "How close do we have to get?" she asked. "As close as we can. But you have to trust me," the stranger answered, his voice low. "The moment we get close enough, the object will either stop or reveal what's hidden beneath us. But I need everyone to stay calm." Katie nodded. She was scared, but she knew they had no other choice. She glanced around at the others. Mike was looking at the stranger with a mix of fear and curiosity. Mr. Clark, the mayor, was standing tall, trying to be brave for everyone. Katie took a deep breath and stepped forward. She walked slowly toward the glowing object. It was almost as if the ground was pulling her in, urging her to move closer. Her feet felt heavy, but she kept going. The stranger followed her, his footsteps quiet but sure. He reached out his hand, and Katie felt her pulse quicken. She was close now, closer than she'd ever been to something so mysterious. As they stood before the object, the air around them seemed to hum with energy. Katie could feel a strange warmth coming from the object, as though it was alive. She glanced up at the stranger, but his eyes were fixed on the object. He looked like he was concentrating hard, trying to figure out what to do next. "We're almost there," the stranger whispered. "Just a little longer." Katie could feel her breath quicken. She was scared, but she didn't want to turn back now. She wanted to know the truth. Suddenly, the object began to glow brighter. Katie jumped back, but the stranger quickly held up his hand, signaling for everyone to stay still. The light from the object grew brighter and brighter, until it was blinding. The hum grew louder too, shaking the ground beneath them. Katie could feel the vibrations in her chest. It was as if the whole world was being pulled into this moment. Then, without warning, the object exploded with a bright flash of light. Katie closed her eyes, shielding her face with her arms. But the light was so bright that it still hurt. She heard a loud rumble, like thunder, and the ground beneath them shook. When the light finally faded and the rumbling stopped, Katie slowly opened her eyes. What she saw next took her breath away. The object was gone, but in its place was something far more amazing. The ground in front of them had cracked open, revealing a massive door, ancient and covered in strange symbols. It looked like something out of a storybook. It was huge, and it was glowing with a soft, golden light. Katie gasped. "What is that?" she asked, her voice full of wonder. The stranger stepped forward, his eyes glowing with knowledge. "That," he said, "is the real secret. The object was a key, yes. But this door, this is what it was meant to unlock." Katie's heart skipped a beat. She had 1,000 questions, but the stranger seemed to know everything. "This door leads to a hidden world," he continued. "A world that has been sealed away for thousands of years. A world full of knowledge, power, and maybe even danger. The object you saw, it was sent to unlock this door, and now that it has, there's no going back." Katie took a step closer, her curiosity getting the better of her. "What happens now?" she asked. The stranger smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was a serious one, full of understanding. "Now we have a choice. We can leave this door closed, and the world will stay the way it is. Or we can open it and see what lies beyond." Katie glanced at the others. Mike looked nervous, his eyes wide with fear. Mr. Clark, the mayor, looked thoughtful, as if weighing the options. The rest of the townsfolk were standing behind them, some with faces full of wonder, others with concern. "We can't just leave it like this," Mr. Clark said finally. "If this is truly a hidden world, then maybe we should explore it. But we have to be careful. We don't know what's waiting for us." The stranger nodded. You're right. But whatever we decide, we must be ready. This is a decision that will affect everyone. Not just this town, but the entire world. Katie looked back at the glowing door. The air around it felt alive, almost like it was calling to her. She felt a pull toward it, but she knew they couldn't make this decision lightly. We need time to think, Katie said, her voice strong. We need to understand what this really means. We can't rush into this. The stranger agreed. You're right. Take all the time you need. But remember, the door will always be here. It's up to you to decide what comes next. Katie felt a sense of relief wash over her. At least they didn't have to make the decision right away. But deep down, she knew they couldn't ignore this mystery for long. The door was open now, and something was waiting behind it. As the group turned to leave, Katie looked back one last time at the glowing door. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. That's the end of the story. If you enjoyed the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more exciting tales. Check out our other videos and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned for the next adventure. Thanks for watching.